Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, here we go, Josh.
All right. So today we're going to talk about Alex Garland's new movie. But before that, it's been a little while. I've been in the movie theater a few times. I think you have too. Correct?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm watching more streaming shows, though. I'm watching Stranger Things season 4. I'm watching Hacks. I'm watching the new Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which is excellent, by the way. Yeah, you're right. It's not that great, but I'm enjoying it. It's excellent for me. It's got its problems. You're right. You're a little... Yeah, it does, but I'm enjoying it, so don't take it away from me just yet. Let me get through it.
It's all you, man. You're good.
Yeah. So I know that you went to see Maverick, and I'm curious to hear what you thought of it because I know you're a huge fan, and I believe that you're going to tell me what is not being said or what is being said. I don't know.
I think, and this is what I've told other people who've asked my opinion, and now everyone will get it. I think that. So first of all, my history with Top Gun is it's probably the movie I've seen the most in my life because when I was a kid, that was like one of the only VHS. It's like real VHSs we had. Other the stuff was like recorded off of television and stuff. So I would watch that thing like incessantly, and so like I know that movie backwards and forwards. So I think that considering this movie should not have been made, this is the best version of a sequel to Top Gun that there could have been. So I enjoyed it. I think that they were able to do things that I didn't think were going to be possible. I thought that some of the concepts of the movie seemed fraught with danger, like including Goose's son in the movie. I thought would have been really hacky, but it actually worked out, and I think it helped to give the movie. First of all, I'm gonna have a big disclaimer, like. This, just like the original Top Gun, was completely signed off by the U.S. Navy, and there's multiple things going on here, and I think that everybody's kind of gotten what they wanted out of it, as far as like the Navy and as far as the movie going public, and I think that it'll be a great recruiting tool for the Navy, and I think it celebrates the U.S. military, and I think that's great, and I think that it was fun and exciting, and so all that being said, it also had emotional parts to it, and I think that if you haven't seen Top Gun, those emotional parts will not hit as hard, but considering this is like a bubblegum popcorn movie, like the biggest bubblegum popcorn movie we've had in a long time, I think it was able to kind of like do more than what a normal popcorn movie would do. So, I mean, there's criticisms and I hear those and I can agree or align with some of those criticisms, but I can't wait to see it again.
Okay, so I'm curious real quick because we've got a lot to talk about. What made you make that opening statement about a sequel that shouldn't be made? Because of the time frame, or
we don't need it. Like you don't need to have an extension of the Top Gun story. I think it's a contained story. I think that we kind of know what Maverick's life and career is going to be like based on the original movie. And the sequel extends that out. And what it does by bringing in Goose's son, it helps to flesh out that character a little bit more. But I think that it wasn't something that was just begging for a sequel. So, and I think that's probably why Tom Cruise waited so long, because how many pitches do you think he's heard for a Top Gun sequel? And I think this movie had like a bunch of different writers, like 5 different writers on it, including Christopher McQuarrie. And so I think that it's probably been through multiple iterations and they finally like honed it in on something that everybody agreed upon.
I hope they filmed every one of those meetings where somebody came up with a new idea how to get Top Gun Part 2. I hope he filmed it from the day they started it until they actually filmed this one. That should be the extra DVD documentary of how many people pitched a new movie. It'd be fascinating to watch.
He was pitched that movie the day after it came, like the sequel day after it came out.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm like, they were driving him to the bank saying, look, look at this. And I mean, he's a businessman and he is a show business and he is an actor who has some great acting chops, but he is a movie star. So I don't fault him for that. Make some money. That's totally cool. You're going to hang on the side of a plane to make more money, then do it because he delivers. I'm not a big Top Gun person. I saw the original in the theater, and I'm interested in this, but nothing's calling to go to the theater right now. I have to really want to go to the theater, still COVID aware, that kind of situation. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it, though.
It's a theater movie, though.
That's what I hear.
You're not gonna get the same watching it. Even if you got a huge TV with a great sound system, you're just not gonna get the same experience.
Well, I will let you know I'm going up to see my brother and my father and my sister-in-law next week, and my brother is a brigadier general in the Air Force, and he took me to Top Gun, the original one. So if he hasn't seen it, he'll probably want to go see it. So that's the person I should see it with. And when I do, it's kind of like a thing. You know what I mean? It's an event. It's more than just a movie. So we'll see.
Yep. I also saw on the other end of the spectrum Crimes of the Future. So I'm still processing that. That's David Cronenberg's return to body horror, but he also like brings in a bunch of observational humor, question mark.
Well, let's hold that for just a second, because I think I'm going to suggest at the end of the podcast that we do that on our next podcast, because that will motivate me to, maybe not if you don't want to, but it will motivate me to want to see it, because I am a little afraid of it. So I have to have a reason to see it. So
I don't know, man. No? I mean, comparing it to a lot of it. I mean, it's not The Fly. It's not Videodrome, to me at least. I don't know. It's bold, it's daring, but then it also has, I don't know. I want to make sure it's not for the lulz. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I don't know. That's the part that I'm still processing. But
we have a lot to talk
questions.
Well, that's a good transition into what we're talking about today, because I have a ton of questions about the movie that we're getting ready to talk about. So let's flip into that.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about Men. It is Alex Garland's next movie after Annihilation. This movie, instead of being an adaptation of a novel or a television show, which are the last two projects that he did, this is a movie that he's been working on for about 15 years. And he wrote the script a long time ago, right around the time he was writing Never Let Me Go and Dread. And he's just been kind of like working on it, trying to get funding and changing up till this point. It is about a young woman who has a catastrophic event in her life. She goes into the countryside of England and rents a large cottage. And in this small town, all of the people that she comes across, all of the men that she comes across, bear a very striking resemblance to Rory Kinnear. So it's not really commented upon in the movie, and he takes multiple forms and multiple different characters. But the movie is just kind of, like I said, asking a lot of questions, and I think it's kind of getting people to try to like process things and figure out like what everyone's motivations are. And I definitely came away with it with more questions than answers. So how about you?
Yeah, the very first thing I wrote down the title, the three actors or the two actors, and then Alex Garland's name, just to keep it in my notes. And then I wrote why, question mark. I have so many questions about this film. I'm not exactly sure what the director/writer wants from us. History with Alex Garland, Annihilation was my favorite movie of the year. We loved the hell out of Ex Machina. I don't really know him other than that as a filmmaker. I don't know his stuff that he did before that. I don't know him as a writer. We are Twitter followers of his, and he's very nature-oriented. He's always posting these really beautiful pictures of flowers in his garden and stuff that he's doing that seems very serene and completely opposite of what he does on screen. Although Annihilation has some ode to beauty of nature, but it's also manipulated in a way where it becomes a very Alex Garland thing. And of course, the Ex Machina house happens to be like the best, coolest by the river house I've ever seen in my life. It'd be a great like vacation home. So, and that sort of is here in this film to a degree. I mean, the greens are very green, and there's the apple metaphor or whatever that is. And then the walking through the woods and the way the cinematographer handles that is beautiful. Nature looks amazing, but most of this sort of takes place inside the home, although it doesn't, but it does. So I just don't know. I don't know. My last question will be, and we can get around to this, should a man have written this and directed it? because is it really tapping into the issues that I think he wanted to tap into? I'm wondering. I'm not a believer in just because you are you're male or you're female, or you're gay or straight, you can't write things for everybody else. I'm not saying that. And I don't think that that's fair to say that a woman couldn't direct a movie couldn't direct Maverick. You know what I mean? Like that's
or The Hurt Locker, for example.
Right, there you go. Perfect example. You say it there and I agree with it here. But I do have questions about what his motivation, for lack of a better term, what was he thinking and why are we watching this film? And the biggest question of all, and we can answer these or try to answer these or pose them or what, is why one actor for all the characters? And at this point, if you haven't seen this movie, it's still in the theaters. It's coming out very soon. I'm not sure who's streaming it, but it's coming out soon. It's something you should watch if you are interested in Alex Garland and Jessie Buckley, Academy Award nominee. All worth watching. But in the end, did he pose more questions than he answered? And then why are we watching it? We've talked about this many times. I don't want to be spoon-fed, but I also want enough information to extract what I'm taking from it. I think I understand what he was doing, but I'm wondering how much it would have been different. I'm not sure how many women were in his ear, but there should have been thousands of them.
I think he does directly address those types of questions. And he, like you, agrees that there shouldn't be some sort of like strict gatekeeping on who can tell what stories. But he does think that if you do decide to tell a story of someone who is not necessarily alike to yourself, then the responsibility that you have to do the research and work on representing, whether it's a situation that person might be in or struggles that person might have gone through, and being able to identify with that character, if it is your main character, that is something that is a responsibility of the writer. We're specifically talking about the writer. We can get into filmmaking as a whole because writing is a singular thing. But once you start making a movie, the moment that you start making a movie, it is not a single person that is the be all end all of that piece of art. I want to agree to the auteur theory where it's like Stanley Kubrick made everything and made everything amazing and he is the sole owner of the art that he created, and David Fincher makes all the decisions and all, but that's not true. I mean, a good filmmaker is going to, make hard decisions, and they're also going to be able to recognize when someone else has a better idea than they do. And there's no way that every movie that Stanley Kubrick made, he overrode everybody else's decisions, or he was the only person to come up with good decisions. I mean, his films are littered with amazing filmmakers, amazing craftsmen, amazing craftswomen, and he fed off of that, and same thing with David Fincher. If you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in their area, then you're going to benefit. So I think that you can't just say that just because this is a movie with a main character who is a woman who is going through something and who is experiencing a relationship with different men in the film, and specifically with her previous boyfriend, and she's working through all those emotions, that you can't say that the movie itself is only from a male point of view. I've listened to some interviews with Alex Garland, read some interviews with Alex Garland, and he brings up multiple instances where other people, women and men, have come up with ideas that have changed the way that the movie was made based on their input. And ultimately he said, yeah, that does make sense. Jessie Buckley specifically, may have wanted to react in one way, and he just assumed when writing the movie, or when blocking the movie or in his head, he must have assumed that they wanted to do one way and she ended up wanting to do another way. And it turns out it was he determined it was better that way. So as far as like his motivations for making the movie, well, he had motivations for writing it, but then once you get into the movie, it makes me wonder if you get to a certain point where just the fact of making a movie it's a miracle that any movie gets made just due to the complexity. And by the time you get to the end, whatever focus you may have had, it probably spreads out a little bit from there. And during the interviews that I've heard him, he seems to be more interested in other people's interpretations of his movie than in trying to push his movie on people and push his point of view onto people. And he purposefully obfuscates his point of view in this movie too. I think he leaves a lot of questions unanswered, and the ways that he goes about how the characters act in the film, in some ways they're very specific, and then in other ways there's certain characters that there are no explanations for, and we just are left holding the bag.
And I accept that. I was going to completely contradict what I just said. It goes back to that phrase again. We thought we had the answers. It was the questions we are wrong. These are all questions. I'm not trying to make a statement about whether a man should be able to direct this movie or not. That's not my point at all.
Yeah.
My point was, I wonder what it would have been like if it was in the hands of somebody else. That said, maybe it needs to be in the hands of the people that he's sort of pointing fingers at, if you will. Yeah. The position that men put women in. Maybe a man needs to direct it and write it to say, hey guys, look, I even noticed that we're doing this. We got to stop doing this. The vicar, the priest scene comes to mind. You're thinking, this guy is gracious and kind and sweet, and actually he has that voice, and Rory Kinnear is doing a great job at switching up his tone and cadence for different characters. A couple of them are a little too obvious and on the nose, but I think that's on purpose. And then all of a sudden he reaches out and grabs her knee, and you're like, oh, but the whole entire time you're watching that scene, there's this instinct or feeling that he's going to reach out and grab her knee. Maybe not specifically that, but something creepy like that is the subtext of that whole scene. And maybe a man needs to point out to other men, don't do that. Don't take advantage of women. I mean, maybe this is too on the nose, and maybe this is too direct, or maybe it's too obvious, but that's the feeling I got, like, oh, guys, come on.
I think the direct part of that scene, and I don't think these are necessarily spoilers, but we will definitely be getting to spoilers very soon. So if you want to see it, see it. If you don't, fine, keep listening. But I think that the creepier part of that scene for me, because a touch on the knee doesn't necessarily have to be sexual, but the way that character was positioning himself, it was sexual. And then also the way that he essentially like questioned her motivations with her previous partner.
What's your responsibility?
Exactly. And that is she's like, a repeated theme in the film. I mean, and once we get into the flashbacks with her ex-boyfriend,
husband.
Yes. See, it's been a while since I've seen this movie.
Husband.
You're right. Cause that's right. Okay. Spoilers from now on. Okay. Spoiler.
Just in case. I was going to say it earlier because I felt myself doing it.
So yes, she says she's going to divorce him, and that's why. Yeah. And that's why he kills himself, ?
You're not sure.
You're not sure.
And that scene I've seen over and over again in the trailer, and I wonder his face makes it. No.
Doesn't look like he wanted to jump.
It doesn't. He's looking like, oh my goodness, what did I choose to do?
And that's the perfect way to do it. That's
I agree.
That's a good choice right there.
I agree.
I think
hers is horrifying. Oh my gosh.
And then no sound. See, this is where
that silent screaming film's got to go. We need to tell everybody you can't do it anymore. After Al Pacino on the stairs in Godfather 3, we're good. We're good. Geez. No more. No more.
Well, speaking of stairs, like the Odessa Steps scene in Untouchables is another one too, where it was you can't hear people screaming, but it's, oh man.
No, that's okay. It's that silent, remember when you were a kid and you would lose your breath when you would cry and you literally thought you were going to die. Like literally as a kid, you thought you were going to die and you didn't think you'd ever catch your breath again.
Yep.
That's what it reminds me of. It's horrifying.
Jeez. So all of that. And he even brings that up and is like, he's like, you can't do that. You're going to kill me. Essentially, he's putting all of the responsibility of his life on her, same way that the vicar is putting the responsibility of his actions or men's actions on women, I guess, in general. But then, it gets expounded from there. And then his next scene with her, his, I guess, last scene with her, when he's up in the the upstairs bedroom or whatever with her, same kind of a thing, you're doing this to me type of a thing. And that's the closest, of a cohesive theme that you can pull from this, but it's a pretty easy theme to pull. I'm more interested in the iconography in the church and the face of the baptismal, the face on the side of the baptismal font of the church, and like the both sides, the male side, the female side, and just the tree. This is where I get, and we've talked about this even recently, is that like I'm fine with questions not being answered just as long as the pictures are pretty. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but just as long as whether it's the iconography being used or the shot selection or the shot composition. For example, there was 15 minutes, 16 minutes or whatever of this movie where there's no dialogue, where she went on her walk and except for her just kind of like yelling into that tunnel. I mean, it was so well done, the way that the sound design was incorporated in with the score, all of that stuff. I love it. And so I can really like just subsist on that as opposed to being just completely fixated on like, what are the themes? When it's a movie that's just dry and by the numbers, that's when I start trying to figure out like, okay, what are the themes? Like I need to get something from this movie. I got to extract as much as I can from the movie because the visuals aren't doing it for me, or the sound design is just boring. But then a movie like Parasite comes along and it's all of those things. It's great visuals, it's amazing sound design, it's complex storytelling, it's great acting, and then I can just simmer in all of that. But a movie like this, I think maybe the themes, I don't have to dig into those as much because I'm just as excited about images, like when those lights come on, when it's at night and the lights pop on and they go off, and then we're kind of just like seeing images come and go, and all the folk horror aspect of the movie, which I mean, we talked about Wicker Man a couple years ago, and I mean this kind of got me in like a folk horror vibe.
That's interesting that you use the word vibes, because I was reading a bunch of reviews and one of the reviewers said, it's like the kids say nowadays, this movie is vibes. And I was like, okay, so that means it's about feelings. I'm not exactly sure what the terminology is. I'm not cool and hip anymore. But let's go to that tunnel scene. The thing that I find interesting is that a lot of the themes make sense for a good part of the film, and then it starts to get out of control, and Cronenberg must have visited the set, and Kubrick's ghost must have visited the set, because then it becomes this hectic, what did you call it, folk horror or whatever it's called, and the body horror thing is going on too in this, which was fascinating. So when she's at the tunnel and she does the tunnel 8-track thing where her voice starts to become, and then it goes into nature and all that other stuff. What I extracted from that is that a woman is walking, and let's just put it in basic terms because that's how it works for me. A woman is walking through Central Park and she's having a beautiful day, and it's a beautiful scenery, and she's got to go through a tunnel, and then all of a sudden she's got to stop because she's by herself and can't feel safe going through that tunnel. Which maybe, depending on the time of the day, a lot of people wouldn't feel safe. But women, you hear stories and they'll say, I can't get an apartment on the first floor because of obvious reasons. I don't want people breaking in. I don't want stalkers. I don't want this. Something I've never had to consider. So when she's at the tunnel, when Jessie Buckley's character is at the tunnel, and she's having that beautiful moment, and she's having that annihilation forest scene, tripping scene, and then all of a sudden, the silhouette of the guy who was obviously there the whole entire time stands up, and it's completely ruined because now her safety is in jeopardy. She doesn't know this guy. She's kind of, waiting for him to say, hey, you sound great, or I'm sleeping, whatever he's doing in the woods there. But she immediately is afraid because she can tell it's a male figure. All of that makes sense to me. All of that makes sense why a man would talk about something like that a woman has experienced in a movie, and then Alex Garland puts it in his film and says, I hear women talking about this idea came to me, blah, blah, blah. All that starts to make sense. So let's jump when she first comes to the vacation home, or the bed and breakfast that she's staying at. Mm-hmm. And she plucks the apple. Obviously, Garden of Eden, Eve, Adam and Eve, everybody blames the woman for doing that. Blah,
He
blah,
even
blah, blah,
says
blah.
forbidden fruit. But
Yeah,
then he's
of
like, oh, I'm
course he did.
joking. Yeah.
Joking. Right. Which is so perplexing to me because why is that there? Why does he say, oh, I'm just kidding, or I'm just joking? Why did he have to make her feel uncomfortable? But it's also a situation that I'm sure a lot of women have been in before where they've done something and then a man kind of like shakes his finger at them and then they feel bad. But then he's like, oh, I don't really want you to feel bad, but I want you to make sure that you understand that I am the leader of the pack. I'm the hierarchy. I'm the guy who tells what's going on around here. I'm the owner of the B&B, whatever it may be. Why would you do that? To intimidate her?
He's very, but I see he is in stark contrast with the vicar because he is kind of like this like beta male thing, but if we're talking about tropes, he is the kind of like subdued, like, oh, I don't want to offend you, or like, oh, I was asking you if you had, a male companion, but then I was like, oh, I shouldn't have asked you that. That character is never forceful. And then even later in the movie where he's going out and, he comes over and she's like, there's somebody out there. And he's like, oh, I've got to go out there. And then he says something about how his dad told him that he was not military material or whatever. And so he has to go out and he has to prove his manliness or manhood or whatever by defending the damsel in distress. So, but he does it in a very non-committal way, maybe. I don't know. He's like, I got to do this because I got to do this. But as opposed to like, I'm just going to do it. So I think it's maybe trying to like represent different types of men, but
I think passive aggressive, toxic masculinity is still toxic masculinity.
Sure.
So passive aggressive or not, or subdued or not, he still made her feel, or at least from my point of view as an audience member, I felt like I was like, shame on you. Don't talk to her that way. If she's not supposed to be eating apples, there should be a rule and regulation on the website. You know what I mean? Like, don't eat the fruit.
Well,
like there's
it's also awkward, bad humor. And that's not, I mean, some people are just awkward and bad at humor.
And then it could also be that it could be just that. Why, if it wasn't on the website or nobody told her, why are you yelling at me about it now? Or why are you jokingly yelling at me about it now? And then she's very polite and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, it was delicious. And she's trying to make sure that she doesn't ignite this stranger. And maybe that's what they're talking about. Maybe men do that to women. I would venture to say men do that to women. I wouldn't say maybe. It might possibly be that that's what that's about. So there's so many questions.
Well, I will just bring up the visual effects in the movie. And the thing that scared me the most from a technical side was from the trailer, you see that one of the characters that Rory Kinnear plays is a small boy. Well, obviously he is not the size of a small boy, but they do like a face replacement, a CGI face replacement of a young boy character, and they put Rory Kinnear's face on there. And in the trailer, it didn't look that great. It looked just okay. But there are other scenes with that character in it. And specifically, there's a scene, it's at night, he's in her kitchen, and the boy walks through the kitchen. And I was absolutely floored at the accuracy of the lighting of that scene. Now, it's a creepy scene, but the whole time I was watching it, I was just watching, looking for, trying to poke holes in the visual effects. And from a technical standpoint, it was very well done. There's certain things when you do a face replacement, like when the face and the chin versus the neck of the actual actor, usually you can see a difference in shading and light and shading. And you also try to do like very even lighting to make things easier, but they didn't do that in this movie. He's walking in between like being in shadow and being in light, and it's so well done. I was kind of bowled over by the accuracy and the capabilities that they have now to do this face replacement. Now, whenever he talked, it was a little rough, but if it was just like him on screen, it looked amazing. So, I mean, kudos to the visual effects team. It was just amazing.
But the question is, why the Marilyn Monroe mask? So I get the boy represents disrespect. I get the boy represents youth and how this is my interpretation. From my point of view, it represents how we train young men from an early age that disrespecting a woman is not a big thing. I mean, why did the vicar not redirect him? He did to a degree, but not really. He was still allowed to say what he was allowed to say. And so that all makes sense. But then why the Marilyn Monroe mask? Was it because she represents exactly the thing that Alex Garland wanted to talk about at that point? Meaning we saw her as a image and a symbol and not a human being. And that's eventually what destroyed her. So one says. That and the insecurities of being superficially looked at as a bombshell and not taken seriously as an actress, whatever it may be in Marilyn Monroe's psyche that made her have a tragic ending, which I don't think anybody would debate whether or not that was tragic or not. Most people would say it was tragic. So was that supposed to represent that at that moment?
I mean, I think there's a couple of readings of that mask. I think one thing that, from a movie-going standpoint, it builds anticipation. So we've already seen 2 instances of Rory Kinnear as men. We've seen him as the caretaker of the cottage, and we've seen him as the vicar. And so having a kid with a mask on, if you haven't seen the trailer, having a kid with a mask on, you're kind of anticipating, you're like, okay, is this kid actually going to have Rory Kinnear's face on it? Because Rory Kinnear is a grown man. So that may be a bit of a reveal when he pulls off the mask and it's like, oh no, it's Rory Kinnear weirdly shoved onto this kid's face. And so that may have been one reason to do it.
So why is it that there's no comment on the Marilyn Monroe mask from any character? There's no comment on the fact that all you men look alike, or all you men act the same, or all you men are one person. This is why I can't deal with your crap. Yeah. So why is none of that commented on if it wasn't important?
But the big question that you had is, I think, the question that Alex Garland is interested in hearing other people's answers for is, how do you interpret Rory Kinnear representing each of these men? Like, is it that, like, there's at least 2 readings of this, and I'm taking this straight from some interviews that Alex Garland did. One reading is the reading that you said is that all men are alike. Therefore, they're going to, or her character thinks that all men are alike. So in the film, they're going to represent that as all men look the same. And so that's one way. But she never comments on it, and she never actually says like, well, you look exactly like that guy. She never goes through that.
All you men are alike. Yeah,
she never says that, which is good. I mean, that would
totally
be weird.
It sounds so stupid when I said it. Yeah. So I'm glad they didn't do it. It was dumb.
Yeah. Another reading is that all of the men do look the same, but she doesn't recognize that all of the men look the same because she hasn't processed that, I guess. The way that I interpreted it is that she, like you said, I think the way that probably most people have interpreted it is that she is looking at each of the men as having either a certain amount of threat or a certain amount of danger, or at least being equally appointed with the potential to affect her in a particular way. I'm guessing that's how most people would interpret that, but that's not the only interpretation. And especially since it's left wide open that she never says outright, all of you men look the same. It allows for different types of interpretations, which I'm sure there's others that I haven't thought about or that even Alex Garland hasn't specified.
Well, I had a female friend of mine tell me that when a guy approaches you and is a creeper, you immediately can tell. You can tell when a guy puts his hand on your shoulder that he's just saying hello or he's being a creeper. And I said to her, I was like, is that because you've learned it, because you had to as a defense, or is it because men just act like that? And she said, well, it's really a little bit of both. She's like, there are predatory men out there who act crazy because they have the power or whatever position you're in to where they're going to creep on you. But at the same time, just like preparing to go camping. You prepare for stuff with camping, emergency kit, whatever it is. You just prepare for life, whether or not that's subconsciously or consciously a decision you make. You prepare for being on the defense when it comes to certain men approaching you and how they approach you. And you can immediately tell at least sense on some level, what somebody's intention is. And I'm like, that's fascinating to me, because that's not something I've ever had to think about on any level other than seeing this film or being around women in life. So I'd be curious to hear like an interpretation of a big group of women, of what they think of this film. And they're probably picking up different things that we might not notice because we've never been in that situation. And that's not that we're ignorant to it. It's just that we've never had to face it one-on-one like they might have.
Say the two guys on a podcast talking about a movie called
I wish we had said that at the beginning, because I'm very aware of this.
Yeah.
I'm very aware that we're two guys talking about this movie.
So the question is, how many women are going to seek out this movie, and what are they going to be expecting from the movie? And then how are they going to interpret the movie?
I will say this. All three of his films star a woman who prevails. All three of them.
Yeah.
All three of the women in his films prevail.
Yeah.
They end up victorious, depending on how you interpret it, at the end of the film. For better, for worse, they end up and survive. So anyway, let's continue on so we can get out of this hole.
Let's talk about the end. The end for me was tiring. I see that, once again, if you look at it from a technical standpoint, it is a technical achievement. I'm amazed at the ability to do that birth, rebirth scene to the level that it's done, the level of reality that it's done. But at the same time, it lost its effectiveness after, the third one. So I also kind of knew where it was going. You can see the eventuality of the end of the movie, or the end of that birth, rebirth sequence halfway into the scene. So I don't know. What were your feelings on that?
Well, I think that you're correct. And I don't think that has any other reason except for after the mail slot scene and after the body horror stuff and after all of that chasing around. I mean, it becomes enough. And I'm now a little cautious of what I'm saying now, because I'm really self-conscious to the fact that what we just talked about. Anyway, it almost seems like it reminded me a lot of Annihilation when she's fighting herself, the black gooey version of herself. Yep. And I have a completely different interpretation of that ending of that film. And I read the book and that's not in it. So I have a different view of what that was. And we talked about that way back in the day. And I still have that same view. So my thing about the birth, rebirth thing was, at that point, if we're not getting it or we don't get it, that didn't do anything to help me understand it. I would have rather it been an actual male person having the baby, and the picture be what that would be, or a male having birth, which I don't know how they would do that, but then the next person being a female area having birth. All of this was just like, wait, what's happening here? And then you realize, and good for him that he has the kahunas to just put it on screen, because he does. He just gets right in there. Yeah. And, it's a big thing, by the way. This whole rebirth thing is a thing on YouTube. I mean, it has a whole following about what it is and showing people, even though they don't know it's coming from. So I don't know. I don't know if the mask is supposed to remind you of the baptism thing. I don't know. To me, you're right. By that point, I am exhausted and I'm not sure what I'm taking from this film. And the whole sequence at the end is so, it reminds me of Get Out. It has that horror film urgency to it. And then all of a sudden you have that birth, rebirth scene in the middle of it. You're like, wait, is this Jason Friday the 13th, or is this, The Fly? What is this? And why am I watching it? So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
We're both giving up.
Well, it's not that we're giving up. It's just that there's so many questions up to this point that sometimes, and I've talked about this before, when I know a little about it, that's why I like the placards on the side of museums exhibits. It says a little bit about the artist, says a little bit about the materials that the artist used, and a little historical back drop to why this picture or this painting or this sculpture, whatever it is important. And then you can go on to Google and find that out. I just recently did that at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. So I was like, that's cool. I don't get it. Let me research this. And I don't necessarily get it, but I understand where the artist is coming from and why it's in the museum.
See,
so
that's interesting.
Kind of this.
That's interesting to me because, like, you know, you coming from the more artistic side, it seems like you are looking for more of a structure. You want to be within the guardrails to be able to interpret what Alex Garland and all the people that are associated with this movie are trying to impart. And I'm starting to get to the point where you just, like, I don't know, you let it wash over you and you try to, like, see what you can pick out of the mess that is left there. But I'm not saying that you want to be legalistic about it and be like, this can only mean this one thing. But at the same time, it seems like you might be more comforted. And I inherently am more comforted when it's like, well, there's only one answer to this. I mean, like, that is very comforting. But a movie like this, like, I'm not going to beat my head against the wall trying to find that one interpretation because, like, I really don't think it's there.
I would have to say I don't disagree with what you said. What I would reframe that. I would say I don't need guardrails, but I would like to know if the lane that I'm driving in as I'm watching the film is a lane that has an intention. In other words, what I'm thinking and feeling. But you remember It Follows?
Yeah.
Remember I had this whole interpretation about what the movie was, and you were like, it's just a nightmare. I was like, wait, what?
But you're not the only one to have the interpretation. So yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not looking for validation of my interpretation by anybody, but I would like to know that what's flowing over me has some form of intention. And that might seem black and white. And I've been accused of that before, that I don't really see the gray areas in life a whole lot. And I'm like, because there isn't any. But that's a whole nother subject. I just sometimes would like, this is the artist's interpretation of his work. And then does that connect with what I was feeling? And you're exactly right. Now, I've joked about this before. I don't know if you remember this reference. If you've seen The Big Chill with William Hurt, they're watching an old movie, and I think it's Jeff Goldblum comes down. I'm not sure which character comes down and goes, what's going on? He goes, I think the guy in the hat did something bad. And he's watching like a 1930s, 40s film, and they're all wearing hats. And he's like, well, what is this? And what is that? And William Hurt says, sometimes you just have to let art flow over you. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. And maybe because it's uncomfortable, I need a explanation. And maybe because it's body horror and it's men giving birth, and it's horrifying on some level, that I will be comforted by an interpretation. But I didn't need an interpretation of Annihilation. I feel like I understand that film.
Well, I think that, I mean, and maybe Alex Garland has gotten, it seems like he's gotten more farther afield as he's gone on in his, especially in his directing. I mean, he wrote, well, first of all, he started off as a novelist, and the first book that he wrote was The Beach. And so that was turned into a movie by Danny Boyle. And then he moved on to doing other screenplays that other people directed, like Never Let Me Go and Dread. And then, then he moved into Ex Machina and on and on and on. But maybe to finish this off, even though we don't necessarily have any answers, I think that one thing that Alex Garland said in one of the interviews that I read was that he likes to watch films that you have to participate in. And he is inherently going to make films that you have to participate in. It's not something you can just put on while you're cooking dinner. Like it is the opposite of that. So I think that that's kind of what he's building. That's the resume that he's building as he keeps making films. And it is also said pretty directly that making movies, like directing movies specifically, is difficult, and that he doesn't necessarily want to do it, but he sometimes feels like either he has to do it, or my guess is that being a writer and having other people direct his written word, his stories, he's probably seen what they've done and how they've interpreted it, and he probably doesn't want to give up that kind of what his vision is of that to other people. And so, it'll be interesting. I definitely think he should keep making movies, because the more questions we ask, I think the better we'll be.
Well, if his one goal is to participate in his films, then he's succeeded, because I have thought a lot about this movie, and I've done a lot of research, and I've had a lot of thoughts. And so if it's just to participate in the film, I was engaged, I was participating, I'm questioning, I'm wondering, I'm interpreting, I'm understanding, I'm not understanding, I get it, I don't get it. So he has succeeded if that's his goal. And if that's his only goal, I think that's a really good outcome. You want your audience to be engaged and participate. And I did, and I was.
Yeah.
And I will be.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.